Why the hell is the server room humming like a stressed-out beehive after an all-you-can-eat pollen buffet? I muttered, wiping a bead of sweat from my brow with the back of my hand. Not that anyone cared. Around here, the only hum that mattered was the drone of expensive coffee machines and the ceaseless buzz of corporate jargon. My name is Alex, and for the past 7 years, I've been the guy who keeps the digital heartbeat of Sterling Corp pumping. I'm the network administrator, the invisible man in the server room, the ghost in the machine. My office isn't a corner suite with a view of the city. It's a temperature-controlled box filled with blinking lights, humming racks, and the faint, comforting scent of ionized air. I'm the one who ensures your emails arrive, your video calls don't glitch, and your oh-so-critical spreadsheets are accessible. I'm the guy who cleans up the digital messes, patches the holes, and ensures the whole damn system doesn't keel over from 1,000 tiny paper cuts. Most days, my biggest challenge is coaxing a stubborn VPN connection into submission or explaining to Brenda in accounting why her password ILoveCats123 isn't exactly Fort Knox material. But lately, something felt off. The hum of the servers was more of a growl. The network traffic patterns looked like a drunk spider trying to knit a sweater. And the logs? Oh, the logs were screaming. Not in the dramatic, operatic way, but in the cold, hard, data-driven way that only a sysadmin truly understands. It was a siren song of impending doom, a symphony of vulnerabilities that would make a seasoned hacker weep with joy and a corporate IT department weep with terror. I discovered a backdoor, not a metaphorical one, but a literal, gaping security flaw in our core network architecture. Something that could grant unfettered access to everything: customer data, financial records, proprietary R&D, the whole digital buffet. It was bad. Like, the entire company could be compromised before lunch on a Tuesday. Bad. My first instinct, the one ingrained from years of diligent service, was to report it immediately. I documented everything, every anomalous ping, every unauthorized access attempt that I'd managed to flag and firewall. I built a report so thorough, so detailed, it was practically a digital blueprint of the impending disaster. It had flowcharts, packet captures, theoretical exploit scenarios. It was a masterpiece of preemptive damage control, a testament to the late nights and early mornings I poured into Sterling Corp. This report, this meticulous binder of digital doom, that was my secret weapon. They had no idea. My boss, Mark. Mark. He was the epitome of corporate slickness. He wore suits that probably cost more than my car and had a smile that could charm a snake out of its skin, then sell it a timeshare. His management style was less about leadership and more about the art of the pivot, pivoting blame, pivoting responsibility, pivoting away from any actual work. He spoke in buzzwords like a seasoned orator. His sentences often a cascade of synergy, leveraging assets, and driving ROI. I'd seen him in action during previous minor crises, deflecting blame with the agility of a seasoned diplomat at a UN summit. He wasn't incompetent, not exactly. He was just strategically disingenuous. He saw problems as inconveniences that threatened his carefully curated image and his pursuit of the next promotion. I requested a meeting. I walked into his glass-walled office, the report clutched in my hand like a life raft. The usual sterile scent of expensive cologne and stale ambition hung in the air. Mark was on the phone, laughing loudly, gesturing with a Mont Blanc pen. He waved me in with a dismissive hand, still mid-chuckle. "Yeah, absolutely, we'll leverage that synergy. You got it, boss." He hung up, flashed me that trademark dazzling smile, and leaned back in his ergonomic chair, which probably cost more than my entire home entertainment system. "Alex, my man, what's shaking?" "Mark," I started, my voice steady, trying to project the calm I didn't quite feel. "I've uncovered a serious security vulnerability in our network. I've put together a comprehensive report detailing the flaw and how it could be exploited." I slid the thick binder across his polished desk. He picked it up, his smile faltering just a fraction, replaced by a mild annoyance. He flipped through a few pages, his eyes glazing over at the technical jargon. "Vulnerability? Exploited? Alex, is this really that big a deal? We just passed our annual audit with flying colors." "The audit didn't catch this, Mark. It's a deeply embedded flaw. If it's exploited, we could lose everything." I tried to keep the urgency out of my voice, but it was a losing battle. Mark chuckled, a short, sharp sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Lose everything? Alex, you're a bit intense, aren't you? We're a big company. We have firewalls. We have protocols. You're a network administrator, not a Hollywood hacker. This sounds like a lot of doomsaying." He pushed the report back towards me. "Frankly, the idea of a major overhaul right now would be a nightmare. Think of the cost. Think of the disruption. We're about to launch that new product line. This would sink us before we even set sail. Let's just keep this between us for now, all right? Maybe you can run some more diagnostics. Make sure it's really what you think. Island. Keep it between us, the digital equivalent of ignoring a gas leak because fixing it would be inconvenient." My stomach tightened. This wasn't just about my job. It was about the integrity of the entire company. I pushed the report back. Mark, I can't. This isn't a small issue. This is a critical risk. We need to act now. I've also drafted potential solutions, but they'll require significant resources. His smile completely vanished. His eyes narrowed. Significant resources? Alex, do you have any idea how much that would cost? The board would have our heads. This is not happening. We're not going to panic over a theoretical scenario. You're being paranoid. He leaned forward, his tone hardening. I'm putting a lot of trust in you here. This report? It's problematic. It implies a level of systemic failure that I find frankly unbelievable. I'm going to need you to put this away, permanently. My mind raced. He was deliberately ignoring it. Not just ignoring it, but actively dismissing it, trying to bury it. And he was calling me paranoid. It was like telling a firefighter to ignore a raging inferno because the smoke was a little inconvenient. Mark, with all due respect, this isn't paranoia, it's due diligence. If something happens, and this vulnerability is exploited, the consequences will be far worse than the cost of a proactive fix. He stood up abruptly, signaling the end of the conversation. That's enough, Alex. I don't have time for this. If you can't focus on the tasks at hand, maybe your talents are better suited elsewhere. I'm going to have to escalate this. You're creating unnecessary alarm. He grabbed his phone. I'm going to have a word with HR. This attitude of yours is a liability. HR, of course, the Department of Corporate Appeasement and Damage Control. I'd had my own dealings with HR before, mostly involving mandatory sensitivity training after accidentally sending an email with too many exclamation points. This felt different. This felt like walking into a lion's den armed with a butterfly net. The meeting with HR was even more surreal. Sarah from HR, a woman whose professional demeanor was as bland and inoffensive as lukewarm water, sat across from me, flanked by a stern-looking man from legal whose name I vaguely recalled as David. They had copies of my report, but they held them as if they were contaminated. Alex, Sarah began, her voice saccharine sweet, we've reviewed your concerns, and while we appreciate your diligence, we find your assessment to be extreme. Extreme? I repeated, feeling a prickle of anger. I've provided documented evidence of a critical security flaw. David from legal cleared his throat. Mr. Alex, our external cybersecurity consultants have assured us that our current security infrastructure is robust and compliant with all industry standards. Their assessment indicates that the hypothetical scenarios you've presented are highly improbable. Highly improbable isn't impossible, I countered, and the cost of highly improbable happening is catastrophic. They didn't find the flaw because it's subtle. It's an exploit that requires a specific set of conditions to trigger, conditions that are becoming more frequent. Sarah's smile tightened. We've invested heavily in our current systems, Alex. A complete overhaul based on what appears to be a potential anomaly would be financially ruinous. We cannot justify such an expense based on your projections. Projections? I felt my voice rising. These are data points. These are actual logs of attempted breaches. David held up a hand. Mr. Alex, we understand you're passionate about your work. However, your insistence on this issue, your refusal to accept the consensus of expert opinion, and your disruptive approach are becoming a concern. Management has decided that your persistent alarms are creating a negative work environment and are, frankly, making you a security risk yourself. You're too paranoid to be trusted with sensitive systems. A security risk? Me? The guy who spent 7 years protecting their data from actual threats? The irony was so thick it was suffocating. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The corporate equivalent of being kicked to the curb for trying to warn the owner that their mansion was on fire. You're firing me? I managed to choke out the words. Sarah nodded, her expression a practiced blend of sympathy and finality. We believe it's in the best interest of Sterling Corp for you to pursue other opportunities, Alex. We've prepared a severance package for you. Your access will be deactivated by end of day. We'll need your company laptop and badge back before you leave. They handed me a folder, the same kind of sterile, impersonal document they'd likely use for dozens of others. It was filled with the usual legal mumbo-jumbo, a non-disclosure agreement, a waiver of claims, a promise of severance pay in exchange for my silence. My silence. The very thing they were punishing me for trying to break. I took the folder, my hands trembling slightly, not with fear, but with a cold, simmering rage. I looked at Mark's eager face, Sarah's placid mask, David's judgmental stare. They thought they had won. They thought they had silenced me, dismissed me as a paranoid lunatic. They had no idea. They hadn't just fired a network administrator. They had unleashed an ethical hacker. I walked out of that meeting, out of the HR office, out of the building, without a word. The crisp autumn air felt sharp and clean against my skin. The city noise, usually an annoyance, now felt like a welcome distraction from the deafening silence of my own unheeded warnings. As I drove away, the Sterling Corp building, a monument to their hubris, receded in my rearview mirror. I wasn't sad. I wasn't defeated. I was preparing. They had made their choice. They had chosen denial. And I, Alex, the network administrator they deemed too paranoid, was about to give them a masterclass in what true insecurity looked like. The secret weapon wasn't just the vulnerability, it was the meticulously documented proof of their willful ignorance. It was the leverage they had so carelessly tossed aside. And I, Alex, was about to cash it all in. The real endgame had just begun. The severance package felt like a poorly tailored suit, uncomfortable and itchy with unspoken threats. I walked out of Sterling Corp, not with my head bowed, but with a quiet, resolute purpose. They'd called me paranoid, a security risk, too intense. They'd tried to silence me with a non-disclosure agreement and a meager severance, a pathetic bribe for my conscience. They thought they'd won. They thought Alex, the invisible network administrator, was just another loose end, neatly tied up. Oh, how wrong they were. My apartment, usually a haven of quietude, transformed into a war room. The meticulously organized digital files I'd painstakingly compiled over years of diligent service, the ones Mark had so casually dismissed as theoretical scenarios, were now my arsenal. Emails exchanged with HR, detailing my repeated warnings, were tagged and cross-referenced. Contracts outlining Sterling Corp's data handling responsibilities, their security protocols, their very digital backbone, all meticulously preserved. The server logs, the siren song of impending disaster I'd tried to make them hear, were now the irrefutable evidence of their willful negligence. Each log entry, each attempted breach I'd flagged, each anomalous ping was a bullet point in my case. My paranoia was simply foresight, my intensity a dedication to doing the job right. They'd mistaken diligence for deviance. For 2 weeks, I remained a ghost, a phantom limb of Sterling Corp's network. I watched from the periphery, a silent observer of the chaos I knew was brewing. Then, the first domino fell. It wasn't a cataclysmic explosion, not yet. It was a subtle tremor, a missed deadline that sent ripples of unease through the executive floor. A major client, a cornerstone of Sterling Corp's revenue stream, reported a significant delay in a critical data delivery. Their email, forwarded through a chain of increasingly panicked intermediaries, landed in my old inbox, a courtesy I'd overlooked in my haste to escape. My former colleagues, those who hadn't been entirely indoctrinated by Mark's sycophantic orbit, sent hesitant, coded messages. "Anything you can do, Alex?" One asked, his words laced with desperation. "The whole system feels sluggish. Brenda, in accounting, can't even process payroll." Another, more direct, "Mark's lost it. He's running around like a headless chicken, says it's just a minor glitch." A minor glitch. The same glitch I'd tried to warn them about. The back door I'd discovered, the one they'd chosen to ignore, was no longer theoretical. It was actively being exploited. Not for personal gain, not for grand theft, but for something far more insidious: disruption. The attackers weren't after money, they were after leverage, testing the perimeter, probing for weaknesses. And Sterling Corp, stripped of its most diligent guardian, was an open book. The consequences of their denial were starting to manifest. Customer data was being accessed, albeit sporadically, in ways that raised serious privacy concerns. R&D projects, once their competitive edge, were showing signs of being compromised. The hum of the servers, once a comforting thrum of efficiency, was now a ragged cough, punctuated by the jarring clicks of system failures. The panic within Sterling Corp was palpable, even from my detached vantage point. I saw it in the desperate, almost frantic, mass emails from Mark to his team, filled with jargon and platitudes, demanding answers he didn't understand. I heard it in the hushed gossip exchange between former colleagues who dared to reach out. Mark's threatening to fire anyone who can't explain the downtime. HR is having emergency meetings. They're saying it's a supply chain issue. They were grasping at straws, desperate to maintain their facade of control, unwilling to admit the truth. They had broken their own house and had no idea how to fix it. They were like children playing with matches, oblivious to the inferno they were about to ignite. Then came the moment. The trap was sprung, not with a bang, but with the quiet precision of a perfectly executed maneuver. I didn't hack back. I didn't unleash a virus. My counterplay was far more elegant, far more devastating. I found the company's public-facing whistleblower portal, a statutory requirement for large corporations, designed to encourage employees to report wrongdoing without fear of reprisal. Of course, they'd never expected to be on the receiving end. I drafted a single, concise email. No accusations, no emotional outbursts, just facts, presented with the cold, hard clarity of data. I outlined the documented timeline of my warnings, attached the damning logs, and referenced the relevant security protocols Sterling Corp had failed to uphold. The recipient, the designated regulatory body responsible for overseeing corporate data security and compliance. I didn't even CC Sterling Corp. Why would I? They'd had their chance to listen. My email was a formal inquiry, a request for an investigation into Sterling Corp's adherence to data protection laws, specifically citing the vulnerability I had identified and the subsequent lack of action. The beauty of it was its passive aggression. I hadn't broken any laws, I hadn't engaged in any illegal hacking. I had simply presented undeniable evidence of corporate malfeasance to the very authorities tasked with ensuring accountability. The system, designed to protect the public, was now being used to expose a company's reckless disregard for that public. Within days, the tremors intensified. Whispers turned into shouts. Emails from Mark became less about minor glitches and more about unforeseen external factors impacting operations. The once sleek glass walls of Sterling Corp now seemed to reflect a growing shadow of apprehension. I received another message from a former colleague, this one laced with genuine fear. They're saying it's a major breach. The feds are involved. Mark looks like he's seen a ghost. They were starting to understand. The scale of their problem was no longer a vague possibility, but a rapidly unfolding reality. They knew the system was compromised, that data was leaking, that their reputation was in tatters. They knew they were in deep trouble. And they knew, with a sinking dread, that it all began with the network administrator they'd so carelessly dismissed. They knew I was the cause, but they still didn't grasp the depth of the leverage I held, the meticulous evidence I possessed, or the lengths I was willing to go to for true justice. The endgame was far from over. It was just about to begin. The silence that followed my email to the regulatory body was deafening. It was the quiet before the storm, the calm before the hurricane. I spent my days working on personal projects, dabbling in cybersecurity research, and patiently waiting. The digital world moves fast, but legal investigations move at their own deliberate pace, a glacial march towards accountability. Then, a different kind of silence descended, a charged, anxious one. Sterling Corp, reeling from a combination of internal failures and external scrutiny, finally cracked, not through a public announcement, but through a desperate, clandestine channel. A private message, forwarded through a mutual acquaintance who still held a sliver of respect for my integrity, landed in my inbox. It was from Sterling Corp's general counsel, a man I'd briefly met during my HR meeting, a man whose legal acumen I suspected was overshadowed by a fierce loyalty to the company's bottom line. His tone, once one of professional detachment, was now laced with an undisguised desperation. "Alex," the message read, "we need to speak, urgently, regarding the ongoing investigations and the operational disruptions. This is not something that can be resolved through formal channels alone. We believe a direct conversation might offer a path forward. Please name your terms for an immediate discussion. Confidentiality assured." Terms. They wanted to negotiate. The slick, dismissive smiles of Mark and his HR cronies were replaced by the grim pragmatism of a company facing ruin. I agreed to a meeting, but on my terms. Not in their sterile, intimidating boardroom, but in a neutral, public location, a quiet coffee shop in a part of town far removed from the opulence of Sterling Corp's headquarters. I also stipulated that only the general counsel and the CEO himself would be present. Mark and his sycophants were no longer relevant players in this game. The appointed hour arrived. I sat at a small table, nursing a lukewarm coffee, the morning sun casting long shadows across the polished wood. The general counsel arrived first, a man in his late 50s, his suit impeccably tailored, but his eyes carrying the weary weight of a man who'd seen too much corporate rot. He was followed, moments later, by the CEO, a stern-faced woman named Eleanor Vance, whose reputation preceded her as a ruthless strategist. She radiated an aura of icy control, but even she couldn't entirely mask the tension in her jaw. They sat opposite me, their initial attempts at pleasantries dissolving into the stark reality of their predicament. "Alex," Eleanor began, her voice a low, controlled rumble, "we're in a significant crisis. The regulatory bodies are breathing down our necks. Our clients are concerned. And frankly, the internal systems are in disarray." "The operational disruptions," I replied, my voice calm and measured, echoing the tone of my earlier reports, "are a direct consequence of ignoring critical security vulnerabilities, the ones I documented extensively." I placed a slim USB drive on the table between us. "This contains everything. The logs, the emails, the evidence of your willful negligence, the reports proving the exploitability of the back door. It's all there. Every warning you dismissed, every piece of evidence you tried to bury." The general counsel's eyes flickered to the USB drive, then back to me. "We understand," he said, his voice strained. "And we acknowledge a certain oversight, but we believe this can be resolved. We're prepared to offer a substantial settlement." Eleanor nodded, her gaze fixed on me. "We've been advised of the potential fallout. This could be devastating. We're willing to do what it takes to mitigate this. Name your price, Alex. What do you want?" This was it, the endgame, the moment all those late nights, all those unheeded warnings, all that quiet diligence had led to. I leaned back, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "You see this USB drive?" I asked, gesturing to it. "It's not just data, it's proof. Proof that you prioritize profit and image over security and responsibility. Proof that you actively chose denial over diligence." I slid the drive closer to them. "You have two options," I stated, my voice resonating with finality. "Option A, you agree to my terms, rehire me, immediately, with a significant raise, a title that reflects my actual contribution, Chief Security Officer perhaps. And, crucially, the immediate termination of Mark Jenkins and Sarah Miller for gross negligence and attempting to silence a whistleblower. You also agree to a comprehensive overhaul of your security infrastructure, guided by my expertise, of course, and all legal action by the regulatory bodies is dropped. The CEO's eyes narrowed. "In option B?" she asked, her voice tight with apprehension. "Option B," I said, my gaze sweeping over both of them, "is to let the regulatory investigation run its course. The public fallout will be immense. Your clients will flee. Your reputation will be in tatters. The fines will be crippling. And then, after the dust settles, I will release the full, unredacted contents of this drive onto every major cybersecurity forum and news outlet. The consequences of that will be far more permanent, far more damaging than anything a settlement can fix." The silence that followed was thick with the weight of their potential ruin. Eleanor Vance, the ruthless strategist, looked at the USB drive as if it were a venomous serpent. The general counsel's face was a mask of grim resignation. They understood the gravity of my words. They had underestimated me, dismissed me, and now they were facing the consequences of that colossal mistake. After what felt like an eternity, Eleanor spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Option A. We agree to. Option A." The resolution was swift, brutal, and satisfying. Within 48 hours, Mark Jenkins and Sarah Miller were unceremoniously escorted from Sterling Corp's offices, their faces a mixture of shock and fury. Their termination letters, likely drafted by the same legal team, now scrambling to implement my demands, were curt and devoid of sentiment. Eleanor Vance, shedding her icy exterior, personally delivered the news to me, her demeanor a stark contrast to her usual commanding presence. She was humbled, shaken, and desperate. I was reinstated, not as the invisible network administrator, but as the chief security officer. My office was no longer a temperature-controlled box in the basement, but a sleek, modern space with a view that finally matched my aspirations. The security overhaul began immediately, a systematic dismantling of the negligence I had so diligently documented. It was a monumental task, but one I approached with renewed vigor, now with the full backing and resources of Sterling Corp. The company, battered but not broken, began its slow climb back. The regulatory investigation was significantly curtailed. The fines minimized, thanks to their swift compliance and my cooperation. Clients, reassured by the decisive action and the implementation of a robust security framework, began to return. The story that circulated internally and in hushed industry whispers was not one of a disgruntled employee seeking revenge, but of a competent professional who had been unjustly dismissed, only to return as a powerful force for good, saving the company from itself. As for Mark and Sarah, their careers were effectively over. The termination, coupled with the whispers of their incompetence and their role in the security breach, made them unemployable in any significant corporate capacity. They had gambled on ignorance and lost everything. My own journey, however, was just beginning. I was no longer the ghost in the machine, but the guardian of the digital fortress. I had proven that true competence, coupled with meticulous documentation and unwavering resolve, could dismantle even the most entrenched corporate arrogance. The taste of justice was as satisfying as the meticulously brewed coffee I now enjoyed in my new office. It was a reminder that sometimes the quietest threats are the most potent, and that the most devastating counterplays are often the most elegant. They fired me for being paranoid. I showed them what real insecurity looked like. If watching corporate hubris meet its match through quiet competence and a well-placed digital paper trail resonates with you, consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories of justice served cold and calculated. Because sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply ensuring the truth, and your rightful place is finally recognized.